The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Sir, I believe you're on mute.
All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Westminster City Council study session for November the 30th, 2020. We'll start with reports from any of the city council members who have reports that they want to make from last week. Knowing it was a holiday week, I think most everybody had the week off from their boards and commissions. Mr. DeMott, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Today I had the Butterfly Pavilion board meeting, and so they just went over the budget for next year. Talked about obviously the COVID situation, how it's impacting them. Voted in a new slate of officers for their board. So really just setting ourselves up for 2021.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor. Any other reports from council?
I just want to ask Councilor DeMott if the octopus named itself today at the Butterfly Pavilion.
If it did, we didn't discuss it, or I missed that portion. So okay. I can find it for you though.
It was news. It was going to choose its own name today.
All right, any other reports from council? The only thing I have for you is a little bit of what I tried to mention earlier. My last discussion with the health departments was on Wednesday of last week. And they indicated that they were suspect of any numbers that we've been looking at after Wednesday until probably at least tomorrow, because of the number of people working in the various organizations that have to roll stuff up to the state that we're going to be on holiday. I looked at the numbers today, and I would be very suspect that they dropped in the kind of numbers that they were showing. We don't go up in hundreds. We certainly won't drop in hundreds. So I would expect that the numbers will probably be stable. It may be as long as Wednesday, depending how soon people are coming back from the holiday. The other part of what was going on with that is there was some discussion at CDPHE Tuesday of last week in a meeting with the health department directors of how they might look at the counties that could go to purple before Christmas, based on what they're looking at right now. And if they did, is there any opportunity for businesses to be reviewed if they have a plan of how they're doing the cleaning and how they could potentially stay open? One of the comments that came out of Jeffco is even if the state approved that, they're not sure they have enough staff to come up with a plan and then go out and then meet with each of these individual businesses in a timely manner that would like to get them open before Christmas. But again, this is an item of discussion only. There's no decision been made, but it is at least looking at the way that there's a potential that counties that are in the red could get some exceptions or variances for individual businesses if they can show that they're in compliance with the cleaning and social distancing and the other parts of ventilation and everything. We're trying to encourage the state to look at that as an option so that we can potentially try to get some of our businesses back open if they can make the compliances. My impression is that most of the ones that I've talked to in Westminster, restaurants primarily, is that they are willing to go to whatever length they can to try to get back open to some level, at least to where they were before we shut down again. So stay tuned as we get more information and we get any updates from the state in our meetings this week. We'll try to pass that on through the chamber and to the businesses through our websites and our social media if there's any changes or if there's an option there. My concern is that we will probably see, based on where we were on Wednesday, I think the opportunity is there, depending on our hospital reports later this week, that we should expect that there will be counties that are moved involuntarily into purple by the state, probably within the next 2 weeks. Depends upon our COVID hospitalization numbers. All right, let's move on. We have a number of presentations. The first item is a discussion on the contract employee evaluation process. This was something that was brought up with the council, I want to say back in September, or maybe a little bit after that, looking at bringing in a potential outside group to help rewrite the evaluation process for the 3 people who report to the city council. I think there was a majority of the council, as I recall, that were interested in this process and taking a look at it. And the information was sent to you in email through D. Martin earlier. And it is back on the piece, so that if we're going to do something like this, that we have time to start looking at who we might want and how we might want that process to follow through. Mr. Tripp, do you have anything to add to that? You're on mute, Don. You're still muted. Larry, are you or Barbara want to try to take that?
Yeah, good evening, Mayor, members of City Council, Mayor Pro Tem. We have just a short recall. I'll invite Ms. Martin to please just use her microphone if she wishes to just reframe the discussion that you had some weeks ago regarding this process and some of the considerations you might have for undertaking change in this process. So Ms. Martin, would you outline this, and we'll allow the City Council to have some discussion, questions, and comments for us. Thank you, Ms. Martin.
Absolutely. Thank you, City Manager, Deputy City Manager Dorr. Hello, and thank you, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Councilors, and happy holidays. It is the season. Hopefully it will be a safe season. Thank you for your valuable time tonight, allowing HR to receive feedback and direction from Council on 2 important subjects. The municipal judge recruitment process to fill the vacancy of departing municipal judge Cerise, and to receive direction from Council on the 3 contract employee appraisal process in 2021, something that's obviously very important. First, I'd like to recognize HR Manager Lisa Christman, who is also here tonight from HR. She'll be supporting both of these efforts, and I truly appreciate her expertise. I promise we will be brief, and we're happy to respond to your questions and hope to lead the meeting tonight with your direction. And as always, we want to be supportive to provide Council with any human resource related needs. So to begin, first of all, is the appraisal process for our 3 contract employees. I did provide a brief staff report based on a conversation that we had in September during the city attorney's appraisal process, where it was discussed if Council wanted to potentially look for a contract consultant to help with facilitate the process. I did review what we've done in the past, and HR will absolutely continue to support, whether we do that to support council directly or help facilitate and support a consultant. And absolutely, we're here to be of as much help and benefit to you as possible. I did, based on that initial conversation, though brief, reach out to Mike Conda from the Elam Group. The only reason why I reached out to him was that you have had some interaction with him, and I believe his name was mentioned. He has done this type of work before with city councils throughout the country, and would be, of course, very interested in providing this support to our city council. There's can be and will be a cost should council choose to go in this direction, especially in that first year, as the consultant, no matter who we would choose, is setting up that sort of initial first year appraisal process. We would anticipate that that cost would go down in subsequent years. And of course, HR would be available and continue to support in any kind of 360 work or internal needs that the consultant would have. So I just now open it up for your feedback.
All right, Councilor Demont, you're up first.
Thank you, Mayor. So first, I'd start by saying I'm very supportive of this. I think it makes a lot of sense for us to have somebody outside of the organization helping us evaluate our 3 employees for a variety of reasons. One, I think it would help us have a better process that's both beneficial to the organization and the employee. But I also think it would be good for us to have a non-bias. Not that our staff is currently biased, but it's just a level of separation that I think would avoid any kind of bias one way or another. So I think that that's a good practice. So I'm very supportive of us doing this. One thing that I wanted to bring to the conversation with my colleagues that has come up in a couple other organizations that I'm a board member in is succession planning, as far as like emergency succession planning for our employees. And it kind of struck me, considering that, you know, we recently are going to be replacing one of our employees. So I would also welcome the opportunity, either through the consultant or generally as the organization, to come up with a structure that allows us to easily place somebody in place of one of our 3 employees if they leave for one reason or another, in an interim, as well as, you know, what the plan is to replace them, so that, you know, we're not coming up with a plan after the fact. So that's something else that I wanted to at least bring to this table. And maybe we have something like that in place, but since this is the first time that I've went through replacing one of the employees, I'm curious, you know, what our process for that is. And it made sense to bring it up as part of this.
Mayor Pro Tem Sykes and Mr. Devon, I had you down twice, so I think you're okay with where you're at.
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I'm also supportive of this. I think it makes sense to have a separate consultant be the one that we work with to facilitate the review of our 3 contract employees. And I think part of that can be making sure that our assessments are still what we would like to evaluate. I think we've discussed that, and I think we can go into that in more detail once we determine if as a group we're going to go forward and who we would want to go forward with. I had a very positive experience. I'm not sure where everybody else was with the Elam group, so I would be happy to do kind of sole source to get the ball moving, but also want to hear from my colleagues on this. But I do think this is considered a best practice, and I think it would help us with this oversight portion of our role. So I'm supportive.
Councilor Voles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So when Mayor Pro Tem Sykes brought this up at first to council, it hadn't occurred to me. So I've had some time to think about it. I agree with what's already been said. It's a great idea. And thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for bringing that forward. I think this would take our operation and our procedures a step farther. So I would support that. My one caveat would be, would we want to consider somebody for the judge who has legal experience, meaning divide that out. Like so we have regular contact with the city manager, the city attorney, less so with the city judge. And the 7 of us, I don't think, none of us have law degrees. So, it might make sense to have someone with that experience. I know the city of Aurora does that. So they actually bring in someone who evaluates and handles their evaluation of judges that have legal experience. That may be useful to us. So I'd like to throw that out there as an additional point to think about. I guess that's what I have to say. So thank you. I would support this. I think it's a good idea. Thank you.
Councilor Scully.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wow, Councilor Vols, I think that's an excellent question, and I wish I had thought of it. I think that is fabulous thinking, and it's interesting because I did a lot of researching today as well on best practices. This was a new idea to me as well, so thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Sites, for this great idea. I again wish I had been the one that thought of it, but it came to us in good faith, and I really appreciate that. So when I was looking across the United States at some of the best practices that I saw, I didn't see that one. So thank you, Councilor Rolls. I am also in favor of this and appreciate all the input from my fellow councilors.
All right, Councilor Smith.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. It wasn't working, and so I just want to make sure you could hear me. Not to berate the subject, but I'm supportive of this, and I also support both Councilor Vols and Councilor DeMott's thought on one on succession planning, and then the other as far as having someone with legal experience to help get our processes moving on that. So thank you.
Councilor Seymour.
Along the same lines as my colleagues, I think Councilor Vols brings up a good point. I would be concerned about, or we could maybe meld that in and find, I have no problem with getting a bid from Mike Condiff, but if we expand the scope and we could get the separate judge evaluation part, if we go that direction, from possibly, there's got to be a group out there because everybody's got some kind of specialty, that we could blend that into the same organization rather than having, I think it would add substantially cost to have 2 people in one consulting group and then another separate one. So maybe there is a group out there that could look at that whole package, because our situation is not completely unique. So.
Okay, let me go back to Councilor DeMott's comment and see if I can help you a little bit. There is not a true succession plan as it is, because the council hires these 3. It's not like someone in a department automatically moves up or is promoted. So that's where it's a little bit different from most corporate stuff. These 3, I've replaced the city attorney, 2 city managers, and 2 judges in the time I've been on council. And each of those has required us to go outside to look for people to apply. And I'll discuss the current judge here in a minute and give you an update on that. But typically, there is not a roll up. Let's say one of the city deputies, if the city manager were to leave, doesn't automatically mean they roll up, because there are requirements that they may not be able to fulfill. One of those, which is critical under the charter, is they have to be a resident of the city. 2 of the 3 that we have today are not residents of the city. So that would potentially leave you with 1. Same with the city attorney. That requires, all of these require formal action in the way of ordinances or resolutions to make those appointments. In either case, those options are available to us to bring in, as Councilor Bowles and others have mentioned, to bring in other outside expertise to assist us with the selection process. There's nothing prevents us from doing that. We just hire somebody. As far as writing the performance appraisal process, which is what we're discussing now, that could be done with 1 or more firms. I know we've used this particular firm that was recommended by the HR, but I would not vote for them. I didn't find the work they did previously that satisfying to what I want, so I would not support this particular group. Doesn't mean I don't support the process. I just don't support this particular group. In that, I think there is available firms out there that might be able to match what we're looking for in both a non-legal and a legal profession. Similar to what we were talking about, can we find one group that can help us with all three? I think we can, but that's going to take some time. So in any case, I think those are available. I think the majority of the council is in full agreement, if not everyone, is that this process should be taken into a starting process sometime after the first of the year. The question is, do you want to do a sole source, or do you want to try to find a firm that could handle all three? Because you have two that have legal expertise requirements in their job performance, and you have one that doesn't. But one firm that could help write all three of those, not only from a professional background, but from legal understanding and experience levels as well, I think would serve us better than having multiple contracts to help write 3 performance appraisals. Any thoughts? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in regards to how the RFP could be cut, I mean, honestly, it could be written and people could choose to go together, similar to our lobbyist situation. I believe those are 2 private firms that went together to be able to answer our RFP. So, I mean, I don't know if we have to make that decision. Hopefully the market can accommodate our needs, right? If we're clear on what we're looking for. And I think whoever we choose, I'd want my colleagues to be comfortable with them. I want to just also touch on succession planning. I'm wondering if Councilor DeMont, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Were you meaning like true succession planning, like for the next person in this role, or were you meaning more like helping us evaluate people to make sure they're doing cross training similar to what we've seen in the city attorney's office? So everybody has kind of the broader scope of skill sets, so that when there's changes, can you help me understand what you were asking for a little bit more?
Yeah, and I think that, you know, you both bring up good points, and it's not really true succession planning and like say in a corporate environment where I'm cross-training people so somebody could come into my role. So that's a good clarification of what I'm looking for. So I appreciate the opportunity to clarify. I'm meaning more so, I mean, I guess it could be a little bit of both. I want to know that we have a process to say, okay, for say Don left tomorrow and you wanted to say who's going to run the ship until we find somebody new. So I want to know that we have a good process in place to decide that in an interim. But I agree with the mayor on all these, like the wider we cast the net when we're looking for one of these 3 critical roles, I think that's better, so that we make sure that we're having an opportunity to get, you know, the best and brightest candidate possible for the job. But with that, I still want to know that we have some sort of process in place, even if it's, hey, we have 3 firms that we know we're going to use, and say, you know, here's, in that instance, we're going to do steps 1 through 3 to get the ball rolling, so that, you know, we're not then deciding on the fly, okay, now let's go find a firm and figure out, you know, what we want to do, how big of a net we want to cast. So we have some sort of framework in place. And obviously we have the experience, especially with Mayor Pro Tem Seitz and the mayor. You've both went through this a couple of times. So I think it would be a miss to not use some of that expertise to come up with a good procedure, even though knowing, you know, future councils could kind of deviate, but it gives you a good roadmap to say, okay, one of the 3 employees left for whatever reason. Here's what we're going to do to fill that vacancy. So it's a little bit of both, because you want to fill in the interim while you're searching for, you know, what the future is, and ultimately they could be part of that process if they, you know, so choose. But, you know, I just want to make sure that we're setting ourselves and future councils up to have some of that experience and some of that process out in front of them. And I think that's, you know, consistent with a lot of things that we've been doing as far as trying to tighten up these procedures and policies so that we have a good roadmap for ourselves and future councils. Hopefully that gives better clarification.
Yeah, I don't disagree with what you're asking. But for tonight, the only thing we need to work on is the performance piece of this. The succession stuff we can do, but in order to get a process started, if we want to hire an outside firm to help us put together these performance appraisals that we're talking about, that's the direction that we need to give staff tonight is, do we want to proceed with that? I would recommend that we have HR go ahead and prepare that statement of work based on what we're giving them as feedback. Bring that back to us to take a quick look at. We can do it as a short post-meeting item to make sure that everybody's comfortable with what we're putting out. But I would not support a sole source contract for this. Any other comments? Catherine, Mayor Scully, Mayor Pro. Council member
Counselor
Scully.
Scully.
I'll get it. You
Like
think
a
we
like, that's fine.
No, I appreciate your comments, Mr. Mayor, and having not gone through this process, and we do often use sole source contracts, so I didn't even think about not using one. And I don't know what your concerns were with the last grouping, but it concerns me that you had concerns. So I would be in favor of exploring different contractors to do this, and maybe not doing a sole source if that, and what would that option be? If staff could present to us what a sole source would be and then maybe what a non-sole source would look like, I would be in favor of that.
Okay, Councilor Smith.
Much to Councilor Scully, may I ask what the concerns you had were so that we can understand where you're coming from?
I can try to send you something, but since we're on a public broadcast and this is about a company, I would not want to put that out today.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Other comments? So for now, what I am going to propose, and if you'll just give me a thumbs up or thumbs down, whatever you feel, is just to have HR go ahead and prepare a solicitation for the services that we're looking at for the benefit of trying to get performance appraisals documented and developed for our 3 direct reports. And that they must also have some level of expertise on whatever team is put together to deal with the requirements of a municipal judge and a city attorney, as well as expertise in city management. Everybody okay? Got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Mayor Pro Tem, up or down? Up, okay. Ms. Martin, are you still on?
Absolutely. So we will take that and move forward as quickly and as possible. Obviously, with the holidays, we'll want to get this in before the Christmas and New Year's weeks. So we'll move as quickly as we possibly can so that we're setting ourselves up appropriately for 2021. Does that sound good?
We're not in a panic. Remember, this is the holiday.
Yes.
I would not want to see any kind of response due this coming month, just because of that. If we consider anything, I would rather see something come back sometime in the latter part of January so that people are back from the holidays and they have time to put together a good response, and not something that they're just trying to put together before the holidays.
Absolutely. Thank you very
Okay.
much. Very clear. I would like to go on ahead and then move in, sir, if that is okay with you and Mayor Pro Tem and Council, into exactly what you mentioned, and that is the recruitment process for filling our vacancy of Judge Cerise. I can tell you exactly what we did in the previous process, which was in 2017, and then certainly can amend that as council wishes of the feedback that you provide us. In 2017, for that recruitment, it was conducted, it was nationwide, though concentrated on regional because of Colorado law, and was conducted by Human Resources with the absolute assistance and support of City Council. We worked with 3 counselors who were involved directly as we went through that process and reported back to City Council. And then ultimately, City Council then interviewed the final candidates. We would propose that no matter what we do, that you do a provisional appointment of an interim judge, and certainly Mayor Atchison, you may want to speak to that. As we've done in the past, that gives us a little bit of time to do it right, as you said, and not get into a hurry and therefore make decisions that are not in the best interest of the city. So we could be ready. We are finalizing the job description now, and if council would like HR to set up a timeline, happy to do so. We could be ready to open this position as early as Monday, December 7th. We believe that if you want human resources to help expedite this process, that we'd want to keep the job open for a month at least, which would put us at a closing date no sooner than January 4th, again, because of the holidays. At that, we would be receiving online applications, do all of the advertising we would and have done in the past, and share those with all of council or the group that council chooses to be our direct liaisons through as we receive applications. We would screen as we go, so that as soon as the position does close, we would be ready to then start the reviewing process, receiving information back from these candidates that we think are of particular interest to us, conducting virtual phone screens or virtual meetings, and if possible, in person, again, depending upon what's happening with COVID. And then we would be absolutely available to help with an assessment process of our finalists as chosen by either the representative group from council or all of council. The finalists that would be interviewed in some sort of an assessment process, multiple panel assessment process with stakeholders from the community, stakeholders from the organization, and of course, council. So that is, we believe we could recruit and have this process completed by the end of February, and an offer then, background checks, et cetera, made, and an offer provided so that we could potentially fill this position depending upon the candidate by sometime in March.
Okay,
But we're absolutely, I apologize, Mayor, we're absolutely happy to also work with a consultant.
Okay. First of all, the selection will be done by all of council.
Okay,
Everybody's going to have a say in who the final piece is.
absolutely.
So the council's aware. I spoke to Judge Lonting Friday was a week ago, and asked him to give me his assessment of where he was at, as he's been a judge for less than 6 months. He indicated that he is very comfortable with where the court is today and his role. He has already indicated that he intends to post for the position when it becomes available. The court right now is restricted in what they're doing as far as activities. There are no jury trials going on. There's limited access because of COVID restrictions, so the court is not overly burdened with trials at this time, and he's very comfortable that with the experience he's gained in the last 6 months, and that with the cadre of pro tem judges he has to call on to help backfill if there's an issue, they're primarily using one courtroom with split staffs. Part of the staff's in the house one day and part of the day they're working from home. So he was very comfortable with that. Now, one of the things that I discussed with him is that it requires us to take formal action to have a municipal judge in place. We have to appoint him through a resolution or whatever the staff wants to set up, because we need a municipal judge in place, not just the associate judge, so that there is a reporting structure there for us. That can be done fairly quickly, as early as the next meeting. That would leave the associate judge for him to use the pro tems to fill that position, as he would be the acting municipal judge until a formal appointment is made. And then that would be through the selection process that we'll become involved in. He was very comfortable with that. We've done this before where we had a judge leave and we promoted the associate judge up to acting until a replacement was found. So that's an option that we've done, and we've been through it. Staff's been through it with us. The Mayor Pro Tem and I I'm not sure about Counselor Demott, may have been here when we did I guess it's over 4 years ago that we last did that. So Mayor Pro Tem and I have been through that. It's a very simple process. We would put an acting person in that municipal judge so that we have somebody in place to make decisions for the group. And then they'll backfill the same as they did before, using the pro tems to fill in for court cases or times that they're gone. The process of the selection process, very much as Ms. Martin described, this is just another hire. We go out the same way we did before. We can use the same process again if council's comfortable with that. We'll have 2 or 3 people help weed it down to a list of 5 or 6, and then the council comes up with a short list. And then we come in and we do the interviews as a council, same way we've done before. But I would not support anything that doesn't have the full council in the final decision process. This is going to be something that some of you have not been through, especially with people in the legal profession. So I look very much to the staff to help us make sure we've got the right one. What I would ask you to do is have Ms. Martin send us a copy of the posting that we did for the last municipal judge. Have you look at that, give you about a week to see if you have any comments or questions about that posting, and then we'll go discuss them when we come back. In my discussion with Judge Lontine, there is no panic for this. If we don't put this out for several weeks, he is very comfortable the court will be fine in an acting position and using the pro tems, partly because we're at a reduced level of activity at the courthouse. Let me see what questions we have, and I want to make sure I caught the first one in. I think Councilor Smith, I think you were the first one in. I'm not sure, because I got several came in at the same
good.
time.
I'm
You're
good, Mr. Mayor. Yep.
You're up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate you reaching out to the associate judge, and I feel very comforted. He feels comfortable taking in the interim role. As someone who actually assisted as a member of council in the municipal judge search the last time we did this, I will tell you I was very impressed with our human resource department and their process. The quality of the candidates we got, I cannot overstate. It was very impressive. The people who were interested in working as Westminster's municipal judge. You know, the municipal judge arguably has more of a direct impact and interaction with more residents than most of us will. And so it's a really important person to be an ambassador for fairness, government, justice in our community. And as such, I'm not comfortable having the position only be advertised for 1 month during the holidays. I mean, we were just talking about for a consulting RFP, we didn't want to do that, you know, just over the holidays. I think I would like it to be open perhaps for 2 months. Because this is a discussion, people are going to have to change their lives if they want to apply for this job. It's a conversation with their families. It's a big deal. And so I think that might need a little bit more time given the season that's going on right now. So that's my only 2 cents. I'd be happy to serve anyway, again, in assisting with this process. But I would also encourage my other colleagues to step up and if they want to be one of the counselors who gets involved a little earlier, because it is really eye-opening how well our HR department works at recruiting and vetting candidates for the city. So that's kind of my thought process. The last thing I want to say is I would ask that we reach out to the folks that were finalists last time and encourage them to reapply. Because again, I mean, obviously reapply, everyone would want to see them. They'd have to compete with the new batch of people, but there was some really amazingly talented people that were interested in serving this city last time around.
Councilor Demott.
Thank you, Mayor. Couple quick things that I'm curious about, and it definitely wasn't here before. I was just in the bleachers watching you guys all do the work. So Um, I would be in favor of being able to have the whole council review whatever people apply for the job. In understanding we'd have to narrow it down. I think that all 7 of us bring different perspective, and it would be good for us to be able to see, whatever list of, and maybe there is, I'm not sure what the procedure is with HR. If some of them get weeded out just by nature of, certain criteria, but once we actually have viable candidates, I certainly would want to be able to see them. And I would think that, the 7 of us all would be able to bring good perspective looking at those applications. The other thing that I'm curious about, and thank you, Mayor, for reaching out to the other judge to make sure that he's comfortable. Would it be possible for us to be able to speak with him just so we're also comfortable with him kind of taking the reins while we go through this process, being that, most of us have not talked to him and he's, pretty new to the job? It might make me a little bit more comfortable if we could have an opportunity to speak to him in the coming weeks. Those are my only 2 pieces of feedback. I definitely want to be involved in the process, and I would encourage that all 7 of us are involved in the process.
And I don't disagree, and yes, we can.
That would be great. Thank you.
We'll get something set up for him to probably just do a post-meeting item as an introduction, because if you haven't been around the court at all, you may not have ever met him. And since that's not his position today, is not a hiring process that we're involved in because he reports to the municipal judge, I don't disagree. Probably a good idea.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also am in favor of the whole council being able to review the candidate applications. I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Sites that waiting through the holidays really makes sense. As in somebody who works in a field where we're always kind of looking, the holidays are always really hard when you're trying to hire someone. People are not necessarily in tune to they're applying and they may miss it. And also, I think you just get a richer basket of candidates if you wait through the holidays. Also, I really like the idea of reaching out to our past candidates. If especially I wasn't on council at that time, I do remember.
Let me introduce. We've got a council member who lost connection, so hang on a minute.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Okay, I'm on my phone. So until I can connect via internet connection, I'm gonna listen on my phone.
All right. If you need to chime in, just speak up, and then we'll try to call on you, since I don't have a way for you to put something in the chat.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, Councilor Scully, go ahead.
So I was saying that, but I was in the audience when the announcement was made for Judge Soros to take office. So I got to watch the last part of the process and very much enjoyed watching the process, but I'm excited to be a part of it this time. I'm fine with having an interim judge and having the judge that recently was appointed to the court take that position. As I would also like to meet him. I have not had that privilege or opportunity yet. I am curious what Judge Soros's thoughts are on that gentleman taking her position during the interim, if anybody has asked her.
I would tell you that I would have all the faith in the world that she hired him and put him in that position.
Okay.
But no, I have had a conversation. She's very comfortable.
Okay.
But your point, I think one of the controlling things of this, as we go through this, is something that Ms. Martin brought up. We have to have somebody that is very in tune with Colorado law. This is not a place to try to come learn Colorado law and being in a judgeship. That's going to be, for me, an experienced breaker. If they don't know anything about Colorado law, I'm not sure they're qualified, because the intricacies of law here versus in another state are very different. And as well as they'll have to become familiar with our ordinances and stuff later. But I think that I don't know that there's anyone, Mr. Mott, your comment, we don't have anyone else in the staff that we can move up to that position. That's the only one. None of the pro tems are looking for full-time jobs. That's why they're in those positions. And they work a few hours a month here in a couple of other cities as well. But for a comfort level for all of you, I fully support having Jason come in and talk to us, set up a chat with him during a post meeting and as soon as we can, probably within the next 2 weeks. But I also agree with the Mayor Pro Tem. As I said, in my conversation with him, he was very comfortable taking this for a few months without having anybody there. And I don't disagree. We need to take our time. We need to broadcast this as much as we can. But I'm not concerned about whether we get this selected in January or February, but that we have a good solid process of who we get is there for hopefully another long term. Our current judge has been there just over 4 years. And if we can to get something at least as qualified, if not more qualified than Judge Swords was when she came in. So Councilor Smith, you have any comments before we try to move on?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I'm coming
Mr.
to
Mayor, I am in the queue. Okay.
you. I got you just a second. I want to make sure because I can't see her. All right, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight for the folks, having a counselor earlier in the process is, and having multiple counselors maybe with different perspectives is really helpful. So one of the things that we did as the members of council, you had in some of these early interview process, you had PD, you had general services, you had all of these different departments. It wouldn't be functionally possible then to have 7 members of council. So you heard all of these different perspectives on what they need in a municipal judge, and having a council member there was then able to bring that back to the body of council. And I would hate for council's voice to be lost in that process. And I also would hate for council's ears to be lost in that process. And Dee, please correct me if I'm wrong. But I believe when I got involved, it had already been narrowed to 4 candidates, but perhaps I'm wrong on that. And then through those conversations, myself and I believe Councilor DeCambra was the other counselor, but we were never together. We were in separate pods interviewing. And then the groups would get together to compare notes. I believe we only, ended up eliminating 1 person before it came to the full council. But then we were able to have that full council, had a robust discussion, and we could also talk about the concerns, interests, and desires of other departments or people within HR. So I know it sounds like more of council if all of us get to decide, but we would be precluding us from those earlier conversations where we're really gathering a more robust understanding of what's going on in the court, and particularly how it impacts law enforcement. So, I mean, I would recommend, it doesn't even have to be me, but I would recommend we have some members of council try to be involved earlier than when it comes to all of us.
All right, guys, that's not a decision we need to make tonight, but it is good conversation to start thinking about. The 2 things we need to consider for tonight. 1, we will need to appoint Judge Lontine as the acting judge. And I emphasize acting. It is not a permanent role. And I want to make sure that no one is objecting to that. So, Councilor Smith, since I can't see you, I'll go to you first. Are you okay with that decision?
Yes, sir.
All right, Councilor Scully,
Yes, sir.
Councilor DeMott. Okay, Councilor Seymour. Good. Okay, Councilor Bowles.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. And Mayor, thank you for reaching out. I appreciate that.
And Mayor Pro Tem, you're good?
Yes.
All right. Ms. Martin or Mr. Dorr, whoever, I'd like you to draw up a resolution for the next council meeting. And I'll finish this in a minute, so don't go jumping off the ledge yet. That we will move Judge Lontine from the associate judge to the acting municipal judge. Now, council, we have another part of this process is under the contract requirement for Judge Source, she has to give 60 days notice. And with her request for the date that she'd like to leave does not fulfill the 60 days. So we need to make we will have to process change of her contract to allow her to leave without the 60-day notice. And all I'm looking for, is there any objection to terminating her contract on the date of January the 11th that she has asked for? Mayor Pro Tem, any objection?
As much as I'd like to not let her leave, no, there's no objection.
All right, Councilor Bowles,
No objection.
Councilor Seymour,
No objections.
Councilor Demott,
No objection.
Councilor Scully,
No objection.
Councilor Smith.
No objection.
Right. All right, so Ms. Martin, you will also work with the city attorney's office to make a change to her contract, showing that her end date will be January the 11th, as she has requested. And there's no, I don't recall what the issue was, and I know there's some language in there about early termination, and the council has agreed to let her terminate on January 11th without the full 60 days notice.
Absolutely. And if I just may clarify, Mayor,
Yes.
the judge will be, with the city still as an employee. So, until January. So would you want that provisional appointment to occur after her departure?
On the day of her departure, so that we have a clear changeover of that day.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And we'll also ask you to send that posting information for what we did last time for the judge to all of council,
Certainly.
and give them 2 weeks to review the document and send back any comments. And then if there are any comments, then we will work that out amongst us at a meeting very coming. But none of us want to hurry this process. Judge Lontine has indicated he's very comfortable with us taking our time. We don't want to go through this and try to get people to look at it just in the month of December. So if it doesn't close until the end of January, to give us plenty of time, and making sure that we also, since we're not going to give you something back for a couple of weeks to even post, end of January seems very appropriate to have people do the application process. And then we'll figure out the timeline and the council involvement sometime between now and then.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for this very valuable feedback on both of these items.
Okay, let's try to move on to the next one. Cody, are you still on? Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem and Council, Larry Dorr speaking. I think we're ready for item 3 on your agenda, which is the COVID-19 updates, et cetera. And Deputy Manager Opie, I believe, is the only individual who will have some comments tonight. Deputy Manager Opie, thank you.
Okay, hang on just a second. Cody, are you still on?
Yes, sir.
Would you go ahead and text Mr. Tripp, tell him to get back on?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All right. Miss Opie, would you please?
I believe he's still on. Don. Oh, he's still having technical problems.
Yeah, I still don't have a voice from him. Yeah, we still don't have no audio with him, Cody.
Correct. It looks like he just jumped off, so hopefully logging back in will resolve that issue.
All right, thank you. Miss Opie, would you like to cover COVID?
Certainly, sir. Thank you very much. Just one brief update, as has already been discussed and articulated, the items as far as data is concerned. Because of the holiday last week, we recognize that there's some discrepancies likely in the data, so we don't have that information for you tonight. We will have an update next week. The only other item we really wanted to touch base on was to share with council just a status update on some of the great things that staff has been working on. I believe you are aware, obviously, that we've supported the community in a variety of different ways. The one I want to specifically focus on is helping get testing available to our community. And for quite a while, we've been helping with having testing site at the MAC. And at the MAC, we have been offering every Thursday from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. until the end of the year, until further notice. That testing site is definitely moving forward and has been handling quite a large volume of folks. On November 19th, which was the last time that location was open, because they were closed last week for Thanksgiving, there were 332 tests administered, and 59 or 18% tested positive for COVID at that location. So again, we continue to provide that service down at the MAC. Separately, we recently just opened a site at Front Range Community College. Thank you for their support. And that site launched on last week on November 24th. And those tests are being offered every Tuesday from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. until the end of the year, until some further notice. On that first day, we had 111 tests administered with 10 people, or 9% with positive results. And in that case, that location had over 50 businesses served at that location. So we've been marketing the Front Range Community College location as a business opportunity to help businesses get their employees tested and supporting them in that capacity. So we're very pleased with the positive results we had, not positive COVID results, but the positive engagement that we had by the business community in that first scenario. Separately, as you notice, both of those locations happen to be in Adams County. We are working to get a site in Jefferson County. That is currently underway. That site that we're looking to do would be able to handle a much larger volume, capable of potentially administering up to 1,000 or more tests a day. So we're right now working with Jefferson County officials and the state to see whether there's opportunities there. So we'll keep you posted as there's more to come on that. That's pretty much our report for tonight.
Sporadic. We've got the Jefferson County Fairgrounds and a couple of other individual small sites, but nothing really up on what I would call the north end of the county. And I know that the city manager and staff have been working to try to get more emphasis up on this north end from Arvada and Westminster to get testing available. We just haven't been able to pull it off. And the Jefferson County Health Department has indicated they would not be able to staff it if we did. So I think Don and them have been working with the state to try to figure out how to do that. And they've made some good progress on that. Mr. Tripp, are you back? We have
I'm
voice.
hopeful that I am.
Yep, now you have voice. All right, so we've got the COVID update. Try to move on to the roundtable items. We have 5 items for this. I think the first one that talks about the needs to address in the strategic plan that the next urban center was removed. I think Councilor Seymour, I think that was you. I'm not 100% sure. So but if you want to take credit for it, you can have it anyway.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I threw that out, and the changing our vision. There's not a direct link in our strategic plan as far as that changes, but since I threw that out and doing some more research, I'm wondering if, and having not been part of this process before, when council makes a change in a vision like that, where we rework that whole vision, really wanted to have a conversation this evening about how does that affect staff, though, especially economic development and planning staff, and how do we coordinate that as a council, and does that make a difference, especially on some of the remaining bigger parcels that we're going to be seeing coming? We can't talk specifics as ODP, PDPs, and ODPs, but does it change staff's clarification, and do they need more of a direction from us? And I was kind of wondering that part, how that's stair steps.
Okay. Before I turn to the city manager, guys, remember, this is going to be a roundtable discussion. We're not making decisions tonight as taking votes and stuff like that. So this is good for us to say what it is you want to understand, what requests for information you might have, or what we need to bring back. And anything that comes back based out of these, we'll do them through a study session. So there's a formal process to get into more detail. But in that, let's start out with the city manager. Do you or any of the deputies want to try to address this first one?
Yeah, we're going to do a lot of listening tonight and taking notes and trying to understand from all of this tonight what is direction in terms of policy, and then come back with research on very specific answers to specific questions. On this one, Councilor Seymour, I'd say that we're functioning under an existing strategic plan. That new vision statement, I believe, will advise as we look at the new strategic plan that'll be developed beginning in first quarter of 21. That'll be one informative piece, but we have an existing strategic plan, and the Westminster Forward, the comprehensive plan update, all of the work of the city is proceeding on the basis of that strategy. I'm going to ask Cody Luer to come on. She can speak just very briefly about the status of that strategic plan, what her plans are, and schedule is to engage the council in 21 on that. And then Jody Andrews, I think, had some comments he'd like to make also.
Good evening, City Council. Excuse me. Our plan currently is to go forward with the regularly scheduled end of the year strategic plan update that will come as an info-only item in early February. Twice a year, we go through an update of all items, action items, and objectives in the strategic plan and share that in an info-only study session. In addition to that, we hope to plan a robust community engagement process beginning the first part of the year in 2021 and scheduling with all of you your strategic planning process that at least probably 2-day retreat that unfortunately we had to reschedule in 2020. I will start looking for dates that work for both City Council and the consultants in the next few weeks and present those options to you and then schedule accordingly. Once we have your dates scheduled for the strategic planning retreat, we'll work backwards to look at possible dates for community engagement opportunities. We are being mindful that we don't know what the next few months to come might look like. So some of these interactions might need to be done in a virtual setting again. But hopefully, 10 months into it, we'll be more comfortable with those sorts of interactions. We're certainly being creative in how we will be thinking about that if we're in a virtual setting again.
Thank you. This is
Go ahead, Jody.
Oh, sorry, Mayor. Yeah, Jody Andrews, Deputy City Manager. I also wanted to add a clarification. Councilor Seymour raised an excellent point, and regarding all of the land use decisions in the city, they're governed. The land use decision framework is the city's comprehensive plan. That plan was actually adopted in 2013, which preceded the urban center vision statement by approximately 2 years. And so that is the plan that's currently being worked on for updating now. And I can assure council that and the public that we are taking the newest vision statement, the current vision statement, into account and into alignment with the drafting of that work with our stakeholder input. So I just want to assure council and the public that the land use decisions in the city are actually based on the comprehensive plan for the city, and that that is what's currently being updated right now, and City Council will ultimately be approving that following our engagement process. Thank you.
Councilor Seymour, any other questions or comments?
No, I appreciate that. Looking forward and knowing too, that was the other part of my question too, is how this will affect our next comp plan, and as we go through this process and engage the community in the discussion. So that just gives me a good idea looking forward. And that, I thought was important as we have these Fifth Monday discussions is, how can we continue to look forward and where are we going? So that's very helpful. Thank you.
Does that address both of your questions, Councilor Seymour?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
One and two are both yours. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other members of council have any questions or comments on what you heard from Councilor Seymour's comments and questions? And Councilor Smith, I see you're back, so I think we have connection back with you again.
Yeah, I have I'm working off my phone and the computer, so if I drop off, I'll still be connected.
Right, we got you back. All right. Seeing no other comments on that, that takes care of item 1 and 2. There were some questions raised about open space acquisition. Mayor Pro Tem, I think this was you and Councilor Voles.
Sure. I don't want to step on Councilor Voles' toes. Do you want to start it off, or? So back since we've been talking about the vision statement, I think I was really heartened to hear that there was pretty widespread support, both stewardship and acquisition. I was even more excited when we passed the budget last week with $1.4 million for acquisition within that budget. So with that being said, there are some partnering agencies that have deadlines looming if we want to get matching grants. One of those is Adams County, and I believe their deadline, and I could be wrong on this, but I'm fairly confident their deadline is in February. And so I was wanting us to relook at old parcels that have been prioritized to see if any are currently on the market, to look as a council at the criteria that used to be used, make sure it still makes sense for us. But the thing is, we're almost at build out, and when these parcels are gone, they're gone for good. So I just kind of wanted to have a conversation and see where this group was at, because it is a bit time sensitive with the looming deadlines, with the fact that when a parcel is available, if we don't have the capability to act quickly, we lose that then permanently. So really was hoping for more of a discussion than just a pitch, but happy to keep chatting if you want me to. I'll let John fill in.
Counselor Volz.
Sorry, Counselor Rolls.
No, I think you said what I was going to say. That's good. I think Counselor DeMott, did you have a question? Because I do have comments, but you jumped in there. So if you want to go ahead, feel free.
I have comments, but you can go ahead and then I'll talk.
No, Mayor Pro Tem hit primarily the same points I had, which was we worked hard in the last couple of years to up the budget for acquisition, and we've gone from maybe around 200,000 to 250 up to 1.4 million. So I think this is something that's important to all of our residents. We see it every time we have a citizen survey. This is the #1 issue that pops up, and our citizen survey is like 92%, and that's the highest of any category of anything in our city. And I do think it's our brand. It's a brand of what do people really like about Westminster. And so I'm really excited about the opportunity, and I'm glad this is a chance to talk about moving forward on some acquisition. And people in Westminster are so connected to outdoor living and outdoor recreation and our open space. So I guess I'm really excited about the opportunity to kind of get going on this. So it's been kind of a long time coming, and I'm glad to see it happening. So and then we maybe can talk more specifics at some point in this discussion, I hope. Thank you.
Counselor DeMott.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and Counselor Volz. I'm totally on board with us looking at this with some sense of urgency, honestly. I think, the whole metro area is moving relatively fast because it's a great place to live. So people keep coming here, as we've talked about, multiple times. And so I think Mayor Pro Tem's point of once it's gone is, very relevant in a very urgent way. So I would be in favor of us, putting some priority to this and making sure that we're giving the proper balance to acquiring more open space as we build out. And I think that really it's about having an open space, but it's also, to me, about preserving the character of Westminster. Westminster is very much known for our open space. And so I don't want to lose that piece of our character. So I would like us to put some priority behind this and figure out, what opportunities do we have in front of us in the next year, and how could we feasibly actually take some action on this.
All right, other comments, then I'll come back to the Mayor Pro Tem. All right, Mayor Pro Tem, you're back up again.
Yeah, and I don't think I was very, if I said this, please forgive me. I believe the Adams County granting process is up to 70% of the cost of the acquisition. So it would, allow us to more than double the amount that we've built in the budget. That allows us to do something a lot more significant. And so I recognize what I'm asking is very difficult for staff. So it might be helpful for staff to know in the very near future if we're comfortable with the existing prioritization criteria. I will tell you there's another, a very human reason why this feels super urgent to me, but I think access to open spaces has been so important during COVID for both public, physical health and mental health. And I just want to make sure more portions of our community particularly folks, maybe in multifamily, have access to a way to get safely outside during this. So I don't know what staff needs from us in order to hit that deadline, but if any member of staff wants to chime in right now to ask us any clarifying question, if there's something you need to know from us that would prohibit, the lack of knowledge would prohibit us from moving forward, please let us know.
All right, Councilor Scully.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback on Mayor Pro Tem Sites. I absolutely agree that we need to do whatever we can to acquire the last parcels possible in our city. I agree that during COVID especially, open space has been a lifeline for many of our residents, if not most. And I'm speaking personally. I look forward to my early morning walks out in the open space where I just feel like I can leave all the troubles behind. And I'm not alone out there, even in the early morning hours. So I would agree with that. And I do know that this is a relevant topic to the Parks, Recreation, Library, Open Space Board. They have had this conversation. Jason has presented on this conversation. So I'm wondering if Jason could chime in at some time in the future, not tonight, but maybe I think he has a plan and he has ideas, and maybe he could address some of these ideas and concerns. But I would agree sooner rather than later is important.
I think one of the key things you have to go back to is the comment that the Mayor Pro Tem made. We do have a running list of properties that the city has an interest in acquiring, open space. The big piece is whether or not it's going to be on the market or if there is a willing seller as we look at these. My experience with the Open Space Board from Adams County is they do these grants more than once a year. It's not a one-time thing because they do them, I think, at least on a quarterly basis, because I've used that process for some grants for the city myself. But in these, they take a while to get these acquisitions put together that then go through. We can't just go and say we want to buy land if we don't have something that says this is a selling point. My recommendation is that we do just what is being proposed by the council is ask the staff to review that list that they have been carrying to see if any of those properties are available or potentially coming on the market without divulging what we're trying to buy. We don't want to jack up the price because someone thinks we're interested in buying property. There is always going to be competition for available property. And I, like most of us, I don't want to get us in a bidding war with someone who can outbid us for development. But then again, that's going to be a potential we would always face. The opportunity to do those pieces is going to depend again whether or not we have a seller and can we make good use of the space, connecting it to neighborhoods or to finish out trails that we're looking at. We know that in past discussions, we have a bunch of trail segments that aren't all finished or connected. Those would be potentially smaller pieces of purchase. We might be able to do those without having to go out to somebody else that we'd have to wait for an approval process on. We might be able to do that quickly versus a large piece. But in either way that we can find additional funds to help expand the funds that we have available and make more potential purchases makes very good sense. As we've all talked about, partnering is going to be a key. So we not only look at the rec districts that are around, like Highland Hills, where we partnered before, but other opportunities, even from corporate donations, to help buy land that might be available to us. Those are all pieces, but those are not things that happen overnight. We need a plan of what we want, and then to find out if the land's available, what kind of a market we're looking at, and then where do we go to partner? And is there partnerships that make sense for us? Because some may not. If the rec district's buying property in Jefferson County, they're not going to want to support money outside of their rec district. They're going to be looking to partner with something that's connected to the district. So a number of questions are going to have to be answered. But I think the indication from council is we want to move this up where possible to look at the availability. What's the possibility of making some acquisitions, and can we do those in partnerships is what I'm hearing basically from the council. But we've got funds in the city. We just had an approval of to county level to extend the open space tax so that it doesn't sunset. That is in perpetuity. So we know there's going to continue to be funding coming in through potential grants from the county. And we have been very successful, as indicated by the farms up in, oh God, all of a sudden I can't remember, the one in Broomfield. Schaumburg. I'll get it in a minute. Metzger Farms. And we partner not only with Adams County, but Broomfield into preserving a large tract of property that serves all of our communities. So that was very good for us. Councilor Bowles, you had a comment.
Yeah, so I just want to, so if we move forward, there seems to be some urgency. I think Mayor Pro Tem Seitz and Councilor DeMont and others have already said some urgency moving forward. I guess my question would be, what is the process moving forward, working with staff from our positions in council? If we're out and about and we're aware of a really tremendous parcel that meets our criteria, then how do we, I guess, get that? Should we just contact the city manager, or what would be the process to get that going, to maintain that urgency? Because we really, I think we're all saying the same thing here, that with the development and all these other, and then, you know, COVID's a tough time. Financially it's tough, but then you saw just recently a 400% increase in trail usage. So, you know, it's a really great thing to do right now, even more now possibly. So I think there's an urgency there, but what would we do to move a property along or get staff to look at it quickly?
If you have a piece of property that you think is for sale or might be for sale and is equitable to something we could use in our open space inventory, give it to the city manager. Let him assign staff to go look at it, just like we would anything else. Because they're going to look at it from the standpoint of can they purchase it? Is there a reasonable price on it? Because we don't want to pay exorbitant prices for something that is not going to serve the community well.
Right.
Mr. Tripp, you have a comment?
Mr. Mayor, I would defer. We haven't heard from all the council members. If anybody has any other comments they want to make before I give my reaction to this, I would defer to any of you.
Yeah, I don't have anybody in the queue unless somebody else has got something. Councilor Smith, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would agree. I think there's a sense of urgency here, not only for potential loss of grants. And Mr. Mayor, much to your point, if it is multiple times throughout the year, is it a possibility that we could be funded multiple times? So that might be something to look at as well. And so I would agree that there is a small sense of urgency, or at least it feels that way. And I agree that we must be preserving as much as possible, just because there is a sense of, I know we're close to build out, but there is a sense of still being productive and building in this day and age. It's still our economy is still strong and we're still moving forward. So I would agree with Mayor Pro Tem Seitz and Councilor Bowles.
Yeah, Councilor Smith, to your point, we can apply every cycle for anything because everything's going to be different and every application will be new. Any other comments before I turn it to Mr. Tripp? All right,
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, the members of council, first of all, the energy from you around this issue is very rewarding to hear. I think that everything you've said, the staff would echo and agree with considerably. A couple of comments. Number one, I think there's two pathways that we're talking about here. We've been in a mode since 2014-15 when the open space sustainability plan was created to do an improved job of maintaining our open space and to reclaim some areas that we were losing because of noxious weed growth and that sort of issue that was happening in the open space system. We're really comfortable that we're at a point now with your approval of this year's budget just a week ago to begin spending money and being able to go back and put some energy behind acquisitions. But I think there's two pathways. I think there's a longer term strategic pathway that you need to own and needs to be driven by your goals. In conjunction with the Parks, Recreation, Libraries, Open Space Board and the community, but I think to meet all the goals of the city. What I heard tonight is that there's an immediate pathway because we have nearly 1.6 million available, and we have some grant opportunities available in 2021. So I promise you that we'll come back to you within the next few meetings with the study session and give you a bit of history as to the Westminster Municipal Code and how it speaks to the priorities that we set, priorities that we have in place in 2014-15 that are still relevant today, and give you some concept generally of the direction we'd like to head. We may need to go into an executive session at that time when we start talking about property that other people own. I would advise that for number one, to not tip your hat as to what direction we're headed, but also to not be talking about other people's property in public. But you know, what I want to leave with you is a highly energizing conversation. We hear you. You know, we can't do everything, but we can do things that are a priority for the city. And I clearly, listening to all of you tonight, we hear this is a priority, and we'll move on it, and we'll get on the first available study session to begin to move this forward.
Other comments from council? Okay, let's move on to the next item. Item 4, Councilor Smith, I think this is yours.
Thank you. And I believe this is the, I don't have the agenda in front of me, the 300 feet radius for notice. Okay. So I wanted to bring this to council to discuss broadening a 300 feet radius for notification when it comes to land use, when it comes to notifying on any kind of project moving forward for council's review and or for a commission decision. So I wanted to bring it to council to potentially do a quarter mile, which is about 1,300 feet. So it's or 1,500, somewhere in the quarter mile range. But just, I feel that 300 feet is just so small on a notice. I know that it might take a little bit more manpower and or a little bit more cost from the city for postage and what we do for notifying residents. But I think it's well worth it, as I have now been on council for a year, have continually heard that people don't get notices, whether it's sent, whether it's in the newspaper, whether it's walking by it. And I think it's just prudent on us to just increase the radius towards, mostly for our residents. So I'm interested in the conversation.
Let me ask you a quick question. Was there something magical about what you picked, the quarter mile, or is it just a number you picked?
I know other governments use a quarter mile radius, or at least the one I work for.
All right. Councilor Scully, I'll come to you in just a second. Let me take one other question first. Mr. Frankel, are you on? I don't recall.
I am.
Before we start a lot of discussion, is there anything that's in our current ordinances or anything legal that drives us to the 350?
Well, 300 right now is the standard radius for notification on land development applications. Although it's my understanding that if it's a site where 300 doesn't actually provide notice that's effective, we have gone to 500 feet in order to ensure that notice is provided to nearby homeowners. A couple of the considerations, I think unintended consequences are always something we try to consider. And you know, the practice of neighboring jurisdictions, I think, would be informative. So if it is council's desire to explore further, I would recommend that staff be given an opportunity to do some research and take a survey of our neighboring jurisdictions to ensure that our proposed radius would not be out of line with their radius for notification, because we wouldn't want to have, well, there could be unintended consequences if we were out of alignment with our neighbors. So I think it would be a worthwhile activity to do that research and evaluate neighboring jurisdictions.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Scully, you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I really appreciate you looping Mr. Frankel into this conversation, because those were some of my questions as well. I am absolutely in favor of expanding the radius of notification. I live on the border of Broomfield, and there is a lot of building that goes on around me, a lot of development, particularly in the last couple of years, and it has not always been very comfortable for those of us who live just over the border. So I really understand the importance of notifying the residents that live close to development and making sure that they understand what that development involves and what it is consequently going to mean for their livelihood. But I did want to make sure that there were no legal ramifications of restrictions or, and I'm curious what possible unintended consequences might be a part of this conversation. But I would absolutely be in favor of moving that number from 300 to 500. I think that's a great idea.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Sites, and then Councilor Bowles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I want to say thank you to Councilor Smith. I think the goal of this, as I'm hearing it, and what resonates with me, is to improve transparency and to improve public participation and access in land use development. So I also would welcome a study session with some examples of what our neighbors do. If there's any guardrails, like, is there a potential where on one end there's even liability because it's an undue burden? I'd like to kind of know all of the factors. And I believe, and I could be wrong, but I believe that this should be somewhat already baked, because Councilor DeMott and I served as the council liaisons for the Westminster Code Forward. And I believe we talked about this during that process. And then I also believe we talked about it when we got a presentation from staff during a study session on Westminster Forward. So I think that council and multiple different venues and other groups have talked about wanting to potentially expand or have a conversation on that notification. You know, is it adequate? Is it less than other jurisdictions? And so I'd like I guess a little more context before I'd want to agree to change it. But I think it's something that I've heard mumble, like I agree with the goals of it. So I'm happy to have that conversation.
All right, Councilor Bowles, I'm going to call one staff member in, then I'll come back to you.
Bye.
Mr. Andrews.
Thank you, Mayor. Jody Andrews, Deputy City Manager. And that was an excellent question by Councilor Smith, and follow up from our other council members and Mayor Pro Tem. I just want to also clarify and reiterate, staff is very interested in this idea, and it would be perhaps clarification for us that really the overarching goal of something along these lines would be to allow for more informed engagement by our public in these land use decisions. And that's me trying to recap, but I think that we can certainly go for a broader, higher level overarching goal like that, and bring this in and back for City Council's consideration in that context. We are ready to move forward with a benchmarking survey of our adjacent municipalities and jurisdictions, and we would bring that information back for you. We'd also bring back all of this in the context of what our city attorney would advise with respect to guardrails on the other side of a change like this. So how far could we go before we start to get into unintended consequences? And there are some of those, but there probably is a sweet spot in there that we would like to bring back for council's consideration with just a little bit more work. But with council's direction tonight, we can certainly do that, and I don't believe it will take us a long time to come back to you with some options.
So what are you doing tomorrow, Jody?
I'm going to be working on this.
Councilor Bowles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So interesting. Deputy City Manager Jody Andrews said exactly just what I was going to say. I think, so I support the expansion if that's the right thing to do. I do want to know, I think our city attorney, Frankel, made a good point. We need to know what other jurisdictions are doing around us. I don't want to see our development and our businesses jeopardized because Broomfield does much less. So so I do want that to be equitable. However, I think the overall goal for me is, so this has come up over and over and I support it. I think Councilor Smith for bringing this forward. I think it's a really good point, and I'm glad we're talking about this. I agree with City Deputy Manager Andrews that the overall larger goal has to be to allow people an easier way to find out about development. I've heard that over and over since I've been on council. People don't, it's very difficult to navigate our system and our website. And so is there a central platform? Can staff work on something that is much easier to navigate, maybe based on some other larger city that has a similar a website that we could take that information and take that platform and make it easier for our residents to find what's going on and when it's going on. There's always a lot of rumors about different developments, just a central location, a central platform. So I'd like to see us take this whole notion and take it even broader and bigger and make it easier for our residents to navigate and have a platform that's easier. So what you just said is what I was going to say. So thank you.
Councilor Demott.
I just want to say I'm in support of it. I don't have anything besides support.
All right. So, Mr. Andrews, I think the concept that council is bringing is we want to explore the potential of expanding the notification limitations. Between you and the city attorney's office, we would look to you to, based upon the comments from council tonight, bring us back something in a study session at the appropriate time, so that we can discuss this. And if there are issues that are potentially legal consequences, we would want to see what options are available to us. If there is something as identified as an unintended consequence, to see what the options are there from a legal perspective as well. And in conjunction with Mr. Voles, is there more than just setting the limitation different? Is there some place that we could potentially look at is where that anything that's in the entire process of land use matters could be captured in a single location and kept updated, so as the process moves along, people can see where the thing is at. If they have questions, they have a place to go to. Council, is that pretty well capturing what we're looking for? Okay, thumbs, everybody good? Okay. Mr. Andrews, do you have any questions, or Mr. Frankel, either of what council is asking for?
No, sir.
No, sir. Thank you. That's very good clarification. Much appreciated.
Okay. Let's move on to the next item. And Councilor Demott, I believe this was yours to talk about the time of billing and shut off of utility services. I do want to ask it that one of the things that we had been discussing with Public Works is the current process of the meter installation. As I recall from them, they talked about this was going to be wrapped up, and that the new software process that they wanted to do, which I think can answer most of your questions, would be up and running probably around mid-21, and they would be proving it out between now and then. As I recall, data allows them to move that billing cycle from the 28 to 31 days, I think is what you're going. And then also, we talked about during those discussions about making it not on the 1,000-gallon basis, but actual gallons. But all that would need to have the new software updated. I'm going to turn to you and see what comments you have, and then I'll ask Mr. Dorr if he'd like to chime in once you've indicated what you're looking for.
Thank you, Mayor. I am in favor of all of what you just said, but the other piece of this that I brought up maybe last summer, well, not 2020, 2019, was the actual, I think it's in the code, there's an actual thing that says it's 45 days from bill date. So basically the day your bill gets printed out, we can shut your water off 45 days after that, is my understanding of it. And I think that, in my opinion, that's too aggressive. But I believe it would take an actual change in code to make that different. So I'm curious to make sure that I understand it right, but I also would be in favor of figuring out if that's the right formula. Granted, that doesn't mean that we have to shut it off at 45 days, and I understand that. I just think that it seems that it's pretty aggressive to shut off 45 days after an invoice.
All right, let me get any other questions you have before I bring Mr. Dorr in. Other members of council have a question on this item or a comment before I bring in Mr. Dorr? If not, we'll have the opportunity after he comes in. All right, Mr. Dorr, have any feedback?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, Mayor Pro Tem. Yes, Councilor DeMott is correct that Chapter 8 of the Westminster Municipal Code speaks to the billing timeframe and the shutoff as well. As a reminder, given the city's current status, we are not of emergency. We are not shutting off water service for any of our delinquent accounts as of today. That remains in effect. Staff concern around the idea of extending it is it would potentially increase the amount of funds due if it were 60 days or even beyond that, that it would be an additional month's billing cycle required for the customer to cure, in as much as they'd have then potentially a second late bill on hand. We don't have any immediate experience with that because our 45-day shutoff has been in place for some period of time. If it would be the interest of the council for us to survey some of our neighbors and then also describe perhaps what Xcel Energy and others might be doing to the extent that that would be informational for City Council, we could do that research. Those are my only comments on that. Thank you.
All right, Councilor DeMott, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you, Deputy Dorr. I think that part of the reason that this came to my attention, well, frankly, it came to my attention when I got a disconnect notice because I was in a billing change when I changed jobs. So, and that's how I learned what the code is. So I think that through talking to residents and staff, my understanding is we've started applying this, whereas we didn't always apply it. So I have, and if that's the case, I have a hard time thinking that we're going to put ourselves in a financial bind if prior to, the last 18 to 2 months to 2 years that we started applying the code. I'm fine with us applying the code. However, I still think that it's too stringent. You're basically saying disconnect, from invoice date means invoice is printed. It's going to take time for that invoice to actually get to the resident, depending on if they get snail mail or if they get email, which I don't know what the split of people who get electronic bill versus snail mail is. But and then you have the time to send it back if you're a customer who, say, doesn't do email, which I do have some folks who I know for a fact, that's the way they pay. Because one of the things that recently came up, one of the residents was really upset about was that we don't send an envelope with their bill because they mail their bill back. But you take that scenario, got time for them to get the bill, then time for them to send the bill back. That doesn't leave a lot of leeway. And I understand we're not doing that today because of COVID, which I think that's the right move. However, I still do think that, even if it is 60 days, I would be curious the actual impact, but I do think that would be a change to have a little bit more gap in between invoice date and shut off.
And let me clarify one question I think you were asking, Councilor DeMont. I think the comment from Mr. Dorr was that the financial impact is not to the city, but to the ratepayer, that they would now have a larger bill that they would be behind on. So I don't think it was intended that it would be an impact to the city, but I think his comment was more toward the ratepayer, that if they got 2 months behind instead of just 1 month behind. Councilor Bowles?
No, I just want to say just briefly, I remember Councilor DeMont and I talking about this back in 2019, summer of 2019. I remember at the time, I also thought the 45-day was, too harsh, too quick of a turnaround time. So I would also like with Councilor Demont to see a little more detail on what we might be able to do about this, and to help the ratepayers and help at the time. So I would like a little more research and the pros and cons as well, because I think he raises a really good point. It does to me also seem like a very quick turnaround time. So thank you.
All right. Mayor Pro Tem Slice.
Thank you for Mr. Mayor, and thanks Councilor Demont for the conversation. I would also agree. I think the policy goal is to be a good neighbor, right, with our residents, and to have a certain level of rapport and reasonableness. And I do think that right now, it's particularly with public works, that could go a long way. Obviously, we need people to pay their bills, right, that's appropriate, and there needs to be some level of accountability there in normal times, obviously not now. But I'd be happy to have a conversation on what are those best practices in other communities. And then honestly, I might be misremembering this, but Councilor Demont, did you let us know that part of our billing practice was you couldn't pay, like if you paid only a portion of your bill, it was still considered late? That still went towards the shut off. Was that you who told me that, or was that a resident who told me that?
I don't believe that was me. I'm not sure the answer to that question, quite honestly.
So I'd like that explored in that conversation too. If someone maybe is struggling and they're paying as much as they can, does that count towards the 45 days, right? Or does that start as they're trying, and then we'll start 45 days from the next billing cycle and see if they can catch up? I'd also, if we're going to have this conversation anyways, I'd like to know, are there any ticklers? If someone has missed their bill payment, do we make sure we proactively alert them to different programs for bill assistance? So if they're having, a financial crisis at home or something, perhaps there's a reason behind it. And so we're matchmaking our programs with need. But those are all conversations for a later date, but I think it's an appropriate request. Obviously, we want to make sure we don't overcorrect, but I think the appropriate reasonableness can be found. So,
Councilor Scully.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, piggybacking on Mayor Pro Tem's thoughts there. We must be on the same wavelength, ma'am. I too was wondering, do we reach out to them other than just sending them a notice of late or a letter? Do we reach out to them? Do we try to contact them through telephone or email just to find out if everything's okay? And I don't know if that's possible. We may have an exorbitant amount of people who are late every month, and that may not be something that we can actually do. But I am also curious how many residents experience paying bills late. Maybe there's something in the process that is creating a barrier there. I agree that I don't see a problem with extending the time from 45 days to 60, but I am curious to hear if the city meant that it would be an impact to us or an impact to the resident. As far as an impact to us, to me, it's more important to serve the residents and do our due diligence and be a good neighbor, as Mayor Pro Tem Sites put so eloquently. But if it hurts the resident, I would like to know how we could, how can we make sure that isn't the case, and how do we help that? And I don't have the answers, and thank goodness we have a very knowledgeable staff who will go find those answers. So good luck.
Councilor Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think there's been some great discussion points here. I deal with monthly billing all day, every day, and have for many years now. And so I think we there's many ways to handle this too. And I'm talking primarily non-COVID times, and so we can look to the future on this. But that's something that I add to a more specific conversation once we hear some data from staff. I've seen all kinds of ways to be able to keep people on track, and it's not like cutting off their water, but if someone loses their insurance, it can cause them greater hardships if there's other problems related to that too. So, there's ways to manage that. There is a certain percentage though that you're going to end up writing off anyway, even if you allow a 30-day rollover with a catch-up period. There's a way to manage that. And with our new software program, I don't know if we're going to have built in there from a billing standpoint, texting notification, built-in texting notification is that's the way to go these days. And many companies are doing that on billing notifications and updates. And so then you don't create a staff time problem in that case either. The expense is minimal. So it'll be interesting as we move forward. I think we can come up with some creative solutions along with staff and some best practices on that. And maybe I too am concerned. I have seen times where a rollover situation can create a greater financial burden on that family down the line. But we are, for the most part, other than our landlord situations, which is, I think, a different discussion that we need to have, we have a situation where you need water. So I'd be willing to give some more leeway on that as we move through this.
Councilor Smith.
Yes, thank you. I don't have much more to add. My colleagues have gone through their thoughts very well and eloquently. I'm supportive of this. And I guess just a quick question to City Manager Tripp. What I feel like this was part of our discussions very briefly earlier this year from the innovation team on looking at potentially this problem. I can't recall. It seems like a lifetime ago for like February, March when it was brought to us. Because I do believe I remember looking at a presentation that they provided, and it was Mr. Moss who had presented on some of the key points as far as comparisons on cities. So I was wondering if they've developed any more into that. I know that we've had such a pivot of a year looking closer into that, but that just kind of was on my mind as far as what I recall potentially us even knowing it was a problem and looking into potentially further.
I envy having your recall after everything we've been through this year. I'm not sure I would have recalled that. I have a text message that came in from outside on this conversation that wanted me to share with you is that there has been an innovation team working on this. They've collected all of the data that is necessary to move this policy discussion forward. And you're exactly right. That work is available to us and will be provided as a part of the study session on this subject.
All right. Other comments from council on this item? Mr. Tripp, I have one from historical, as I recall dealing with this issue at one time in the past, that we had an individual who was 3 months behind on the water, and they would come in and pay 1 month's bill so they wouldn't get shut off. They'd wait till they got to the third month again, then they'd come in and pay one bill. But in that instance, the shut off wasn't until they were 3 months behind, not 1 month behind. Is that still part of the policy, or has that policy changed? I don't need an answer now. It's just something would you look into? Because at that time that we were dealing with this, and this has probably been 8, 9 years ago, and I know that this particular person called me at 1 a.m. in the morning from the Stapleton Airport, as I recall, and wanted us to open up City Hall so they could come in and pay the 1 month water bill because they'd been on vacation. And they wanted to take a shower before they went to work. And I tried very tactfully to direct them to go find a hotel because I wasn't opening up City Hall at 1 a.m. in the morning. So some comedy relief there, but my impression was that there was a 3-month time before any actual shut off took place. So if you could look into that and see if that's still available or still true, or maybe we've changed and maybe I just misunderstood.
Mayor and council, we've been recording all these questions.
Okay.
And we'll be prepared to answer all of them. Thank you.
Councilor Demont.
Just curious if they were calling from a payphone, because you just aged yourself, sir. Stapleton Airport.
Well, that's where it was from, and they called my house at that time because we weren't using a lot of cell phones. So they got the numbers from somewhere. And they had no problem calling at 1 o'clock in the morning because it was of interest to them. But either way, they didn't get their water bill paid that morning. Not at that time. All right, any other comments from council? All right, staff, I think you've captured everything. Council, before we wrap up, I'll remind you have appointments tomorrow for videotaping for the holidays. Please be aware that we also have some inclement weather coming in as projected for tomorrow, so dress appropriately. Any other items for the good of the order, Mr. Tripp?
No, just thank you very much for all your feedback tonight and in the direction. Thank you.
Council, we will be doing something similar to this again at the next opportunity of a 5th Monday in the next quarter. Thank you for your time and your patience tonight getting through everything. This will probably be one of the earliest times you have gone home anytime in 2020. So be grateful that this is the only 5th Monday you had. Everyone be safe, and we'll see everyone tomorrow night. Council and staff, we are therefore adjourned.
Have a great evening, everyone.